In 2007, the most powerful man on Earth had a problem. The Secret Service wanted to take away his phone. Lawyers told him it was a security risk. The NSA wasn't sure it could be trusted. But Barack Obama refused to give it up, because the device in his pocket wasn't just a phone. It was, by most measures, the single most secure communication device ever sold to a civilian. That phone had a name: BlackBerry. For a decade, BlackBerry didn't just compete in the smartphone market. It was the smartphone market. 43% of every device sold in America, the phone of presidents, CEOs, and three-letter government agencies. And then, in less than 5 years, it collapsed to basically zero. This isn't a story about a company that ignored the future. It's stranger than that. BlackBerry saw the future coming and built a wall to keep it out, because the wall was the entire business. Today, we're tracing how the most secure phone on the planet became a prison, and how the world traded that security away for something it wanted more. Welcome back to Capital Tales, the channel where we dig through the wreckage of empires that should still be standing. If you've ever wondered how a company can be right about everything and still lose everything, stick around, because BlackBerry is the cleanest case study in the history of consumer tech. Quick housekeeping. If you want more deep dives like this one, Blockbuster, Nokia, Kodak, the companies that built the modern world and then got buried by it, hit subscribe, because we've got a whole series on corporate downfalls coming. All right, let's go back to where it all started. A research lab in Waterloo, Ontario, and a problem nobody else was trying to solve. Part 1. The Indestructible Fortress. In the mid-1990s, a small Canadian company called Research in Motion had a strange obsession. While almost everyone else in mobile technology was racing to make phones that could do more — games, cameras, music — RIM was racing to make a device that could be trusted with secrets. Their solution was something called the Network Operations Center, or the NOC. Every single message sent from a BlackBerry didn't just go to the recipient. It routed through RIM's own private network first, encrypted end-to-end, compressed and verified. No carrier could read it. No government, in theory, could intercept it. Not even RIM itself held the keys. Think about what that meant in practice. A law firm could send privileged documents. A hospital could send patient records. A government official could send classified briefings, all through a commercial smartphone. By the early 2000s, BlackBerry wasn't selling a phone. It was selling certainty in a world that didn't have any. And there was a second ingredient nobody saw coming: addiction, built by accident. The physical keyboard, those small, tactile, clicking keys, made typing feel less like a chore and more like a habit you couldn't put down. Combine that with the infamous red blinking light in the corner of the device, the one that told you, silently, someone needs you. RIM had created something close to the first smartphone compulsion loop. Executives weren't carrying a BlackBerry, they were carrying a leash, and they loved it. People started calling it the Crackberry. That nickname wasn't a marketing slogan, it was a warning nobody listened to. By 2007, RIM commanded over 43% of the US smartphone market. Boards of directors mandated it. Governments classified it as a national security tool. RIM had built something extraordinary: a closed ecosystem, hardware, software, and network, all locked together by one unbreakable promise: security above everything. The problem is, above everything is a dangerous place to put a single value, because everything else in the world was about to change. Part 2. The Great Encryption Paradox. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and changed the rules of the game RIM thought it was winning. The iPhone had no physical keyboard. It had a camera. It had a browser that actually rendered the real internet. And critically, it had almost none of BlackBerry's security infrastructure. Inside RIM's offices, this should have triggered a 5-alarm fire. Instead, internal accounts describe something closer to dismissal. The iPhone's battery life was bad. Typing on glass was clearly inferior. It had no enterprise security to speak of. From an engineering standpoint, RIM wasn't wrong about any of that. But they were answering the wrong question. The question wasn't which device is more secure. The question was, which device do people actually want to hold? Here's where the paradox bites hardest. A front-facing camera was a genuine engineering nightmare for BlackBerry's enterprise customers. Government and corporate security policies explicitly banned cameras inside secure facilities. Adding one didn't just require new hardware, it required renegotiating the trust relationship with every government and Fortune 500 client. Third-party app stores carried the same poison. Every app was a potential backdoor, a potential leak, a potential reason a CIO would cancel a multi-thousand-unit contract. So RIM did the rational thing for the business it had, and the fatal thing for the business it needed to become. It kept saying no. No camera for years on flagship security tier devices. No open app ecosystem until it was far too late. Meanwhile, Apple, and soon Google with Android, were making the opposite bet entirely. Ship the experience people want and treat security as something you patch and improve later. It turned out the market didn't actually want certainty. It wanted convenience, novelty, and a screen full of colorful icons. RIM had built the world's most trustworthy phone at the exact moment the world decided it would rather have the world's most entertaining one. Part 3. The Institutional Stranglehold. By 2009, BlackBerry knew it had a touchscreen problem, so it built one. The BlackBerry Storm launched with enormous marketing weight behind it, and it was, by nearly every account, a disaster. The clickable touchscreen lagged, the software stuttered, and reviewers tore it apart. 2 years later came the Playbook, BlackBerry's answer to the iPad. It launched without native email. Let that sit for a second. A business communications company released a tablet that couldn't natively check email on day one. These weren't isolated bad products. They were symptoms of something deeper, an organization that was, internally, at war with itself. Picture the conference room. On one side, engineering and security teams, the people who had built RIM's reputation, insisting that any new feature first survive a gauntlet of encryption review, enterprise compliance, and carrier certification. On the other side, a marketing and product team, watching Apple ship a new iPhone every 12 months, while BlackBerry's flagship update cycle crawled along at the pace of a regulated utility. Neither side was wrong. Security needs rigor. Consumer products need speed. BlackBerry simply never resolved which one it actually was. And here's the institutional trap nobody talks about enough. The same government and enterprise contracts that built RIM's empire became the architecture holding it hostage. When your biggest customers are defense departments, banks, and Fortune 500 legal teams, you don't get to move fast and break things. You get compliance audits. You get multi-year certification cycles before a single new chip or OS update is approved for deployment. BlackBerry had built a business model that was structurally incapable of shipping software at the speed the consumer market now expected. It wasn't a leadership failure in the simple sense. It was a business model that succeeded so completely at one thing that it became physically unable to do the other. By the time BlackBerry tried to launch a true competitor, BlackBerry 10 in 2013, Android and iOS had a 6-year head start on app ecosystems, developer goodwill, and consumer mindshare. The fortress had held. It just turned out nobody wanted to live inside a fortress anymore. Part 4. A world traded for usability. Here's the part of the story that's less about BlackBerry and more about US. Because BlackBerry didn't really lose to a better phone. It lost to a different set of values entirely, and those values were ours, not theirs. Consumers, it turned out, were willing to trade privacy for convenience almost every single time they were given the choice. Free apps that monetized through advertising and data collection beat paid, security-vetted alternatives. Developers noticed. BlackBerry World never built the gravity to pull developers away from platforms where the audience and the money already was. Why build for a shrinking, security-restricted ecosystem when Android and iOS offered hundreds of millions of users and far simpler approval processes? This is the trade nobody signed a contract for, but everyone made anyway. Less control over your data in exchange for an experience that simply felt better in your hand. Touchscreens, app stores, push notifications for games, not just emails. A camera that didn't need a security exception. One by one, every restriction that made BlackBerry trustworthy also made it less fun. And fun won. By 2016, BlackBerry had stopped making its own hardware altogether. The company that once defined what a smartphone was became a software licensor, watching its old market share rounded down to absolute zero. Not because the encryption stopped working, because almost nobody was choosing encryption anymore. Part 5. The irony of the modern privacy crisis. Here's where the story loops back around, because the industry didn't just move on from BlackBerry's philosophy, it buried it. And the bill for that decision has been arriving again and again ever since. 2026 alone has been a brutal case study. Healthcare systems have been breached with patients' biometric data, fingerprints, medical scans, exposed alongside social security numbers. Education platforms used by tens of thousands of schools worldwide have leaked private messages between students and teachers at a scale measured in the hundreds of millions of accounts. Extortion gangs have spent the years systematically draining corporate cloud platforms, not by breaking in through some clever exploit, but simply by logging in. Phishing a single employee, harvesting a vendor's credentials, and walking through the front door because nobody locked it. Now, hold that up against the BlackBerry model, a closed network, end-to-end encryption by default. No third-party app free-for-all creating 1,000 attack surfaces. RIM's engineers weren't wrong about the threat. They were just early, and they bet the entire company on a world that decided, overwhelmingly, that it would rather be entertained than protected. So, was BlackBerry's downfall a tragedy or a trade the world made with its eyes open? Maybe both. The company was right about the danger. It was wrong about what people actually wanted on a Tuesday afternoon when they just wanted to scroll, swipe, and play a game on the train home. Security doesn't sell phones. Convenience does. BlackBerry built the fortress correctly. It just forgot to ask anyone if they wanted to live inside one. BlackBerry didn't fail because it misunderstood security. It failed because it misunderstood people. And maybe that's the real lesson buried in every one of these corporate collapse stories. The companies that die aren't usually wrong about the problem. They're wrong about what people are willing to sacrifice to solve it. If you enjoyed this one, there's a whole graveyard of empires we haven't covered yet. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment telling me which downfall you want covered next, and I'll see you in the next Capital Tale.